Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Authoritas Tea Time SEO, where we encourage everyone to take a nice little tea break at 4 p.m., where we can also connect with others and learn something new. I'm SEO Joe Blogs, and I'm also joined here by Carrie Shepherd from Authoritas. We have some great speakers on today talking about how to make paid and organic work together. We have Azeem, Julie, and Maciej, and they'll be sharing their great tips about how you can actually make these two channels work seamlessly together and not in silo. Please feel free to add your comments and questions in the chat, and we'll have a lot of time afterwards for our speakers to answer all your Q&As. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Azeem, who can introduce himself. Then we'll have Julie and Maciej. And once again, thank you everyone for coming, and a big thank you to our speakers as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So, yeah, hello everybody. I'm Azeem. You may have seen me doing a couple of these before. I promise this one is probably going to be the last one, maybe. I've been around the block. I've been in the industry for a few years, pretty much covering everything, but my beginnings were in PPC. Spent about 4 years doing that, where I earned this t-shirt, as you can see. But yeah, I've spoken at a few conferences, and this year I'm the judge for 2 awards, the UK Digital Growth Awards and the Global Digital Excellence Awards. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Friedman Bacchini, and I just want to say thank you so much for having me here on this program. I have my own paid search consulting firm. I have been in paid search since literally the beginning. Prior to that, I did work in web development and SEO, so I have a bit of a background in that practice as well. Although I did SEO in the good old days when it was easy. I admire everyone who's still trying to do it today greatly. I also run the PPC chat on Twitter, which if you haven't had a chance to check that out and you're interested in paid search topics, I would recommend it. And I'm a regular conference speaker on paid search topics.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here. My name is Maciej, and I'm working as a marketing data scientist at Bluerank in Poland. And I'm one of the creators of Blueattribution tool, and I mostly work with attribution and machine learning models and helping others to understand their data and provide some more advanced analysis.
Awesome. So I'll begin. As I mentioned in my intro slide, I began in PPC. So I worked in an agency, and PPC was what I specialized in all day, every day. I did not know anything about SEO. So this phrase that you can see here was something that I coined, where we would always have a bit of friendly joking between the PPC team and the SEO team. Because I never understood it, I always thought, well, why wait for it when you can pay for it? So any sort of results or anything else like that, oh, we could just stick an ad there. And then I started to understand how SEO worked and how SEO and PPC could work together. So I'm going to explain to you some of the benefits of that and why it's really good for them to be working together, because believe it or not, there are some people who still have this mindset that one channel is better than the other, or one should have more priority than the other. But over the next few slides, I will go through a few points with you where that should be the case. So your first tip is to own the SERP. You want to take up as much real estate as possible. Let your analytics classifications sort your traffic out into the right buckets. Then you want to increase your trust. Recently, I've seen stats and numbers around so many percentages of people will think that this is an ad. So many people will think this isn't. A certain number of people will scroll past the ads and click an organic link. But ultimately, the more that they see your website is there, or that your client's website is there, the more trust that they'll gain into you. And then that goes hand in hand with relevancy and remaining relevant and being in the front of your mind. And then ultimately, if you're in e-commerce, it's an absolute no-brainer. You want to dominate that entire SERP landscape with your brand, with your SERP. God, I can't talk. With your product, I should say. Sorry. Speaking of brand, which is the next slide, you definitely want to own your brand. I've previously seen stats about how you should or shouldn't pay for your brand. There was a quote that I read where somebody said, I won't name them, but they said, it's not my job to pay for my own traffic. It's Google's job to get me to the top spot. Well, if you think of it in that sense, then PPC could be a great way to defend your brand against competitor bidding, because you get cheap clicks, usually a ton of conversions as well at a great CPA. Often I found that customers will find brands that I've worked with via the generics. So the best car for 4, 5, 6 people, or the best place to study X. They might not convert immediately, especially with sort of longer term and considered purchases. And that's where brand is good, because then they get introduced to your brand. They won't ever search for that same thing again. They'll then start to search for your brand, which is why that's important. Brand building, as I've mentioned, brings you great ROI. When you think about your budgeting, especially for the year, what I do is separate a pot of budget purely for brand and then isolate that. Where you have it all together, that will then start to affect your overall cost per acquisition or your customer acquisition cost, and it starts to muddy the waters a little bit. In terms of market research for free, absolutely. Create an audience of that traffic, understand how they behave, and understand how they behave differently versus a different channel. Then you can use that information to refine your marketing across the board. And then the final point here, the curious case of those numbers. Those numbers, oh, we've jumped on, sorry, if we go back a slide. Those numbers represent every Saturday in the UK since lockdown was announced. So every Saturday after the 23rd of March. Now, I won't say who they are, but every Saturday on those dates, spikes for X and discount code have peaked throughout the week. So that's the highest time that this particular vertical has seen brand name, discount code have peaked throughout the week. Previously, I've worked in a sector where it's super competitive, and we were bidding against competitors were bidding against us. That information that I got there is from Google Trends. Anybody can access that. If I am my competitor, if I notice this about my competitor, you could do some really sneaky stuff. Update your PPC ad copy and say things like 30% discount on today or X, Y, and Z. Do anything to try and snatch that customer at the last second. It's a brilliant way of trying to take some of your competitors' traffic, especially in something that's highly competitive. It's subjective. Some people do or don't do it, but it takes literally 5 or 10 minutes to just jump on Google Trends, type in your competitor's name and discount code, and then see when that traffic actually comes. If I know my competitor's traffic is buying on these days, I'm going to make sure that I am there to try and nick a bit of their traffic if I can, which is why I segment some of my brand traffic. So yeah, speaking of which, if we go on to the third slide, finally, it's pretty much about harmony. So you've got your 2 channels, SEO and PPC. Ultimately, they've got one goal. More often than not, when you increase a bid in PPC, you might see a loss in SEO traffic. So what you don't want to do is make one channel that's less effective than the other. You also want to prevent sort of duplicate pages. So I've seen pages that have been created to serve a purpose that's already existed organically. Why not update the one that's existed already for both channels, understand how they behave, look at things like scroll depth, which I've talked about before, and then you shouldn't really say things, and I know that people have said it before, where PPC is referred to as like sprinkle a bit of PPC on there, or turn the PPC tap on. Typically what you'll see is during a campaign, PPC traffic and traffic to your website will increase, and then it will sort of come back down to normal levels once your campaign ends, whereas SEO is a little bit more consistent. The final point I make on this slide is that you should complement your efforts in SEO with your PPC search query report data. Understand what your traffic is actually searching for, get those longer tail keywords, and then optimize your organic content towards that. The last point I'll say, pretty much, if we can jump on to the next slide, is something that I've already covered. Don't be that person who thinks that one channel is better than the other, or that you shouldn't do this or that you shouldn't do that. As I've mentioned, PPC is typically a quick win. You can change the message very simply, very easily. You can test out things like responsive search ads to understand your audience a little bit better. As I've mentioned, your traffic will pick up during a campaign and return to normal after. With SEO, more often than not, it takes a longer time to pick up the momentum. The ROI is not always immediate, but your results will often prosper for longer. Find that middle ground, find that happy balance. With PPC, segment your branded budget and always bid on your brand. It's a bit subjective about whether you should or you shouldn't. I'm firmly of the belief that you should. And that's pretty much me. Thank you very much for having me.
Great stuff. I agree with everything you said. I'm going to go a little bit further into the search queries and what you can glean from that, and how you can take that information and apply it to what you're doing on the organic side of things. I agree with Azeem 100%. Some of my favorite projects and my favorite clients to work with are ones where there's not this huge disconnect between what's happening on the organic side and what's happening on the paid side. I feel like there's so much information that we can share with each other that just makes us able to do what we're doing that much better. So I hope that everybody can have that attitude, that we're not at odds with each other. We're really complementary, and we're all trying to sort of reach the same goal. The other thing that I want to talk to you guys about today, which is something I've been working on a lot lately, is learning about your audiences via social advertising. So we can hop right to the next slide. So the query data, I don't know how familiar everybody is with this, but essentially, we used to be able to see, again, in the good old days of SEO and in the good old days of Google Analytics, you used to be able to see the queries and the terms that would be driving your organic traffic. Of course, Google took all that away a number of years ago, but they didn't take it away on the advertising side. So I think one of the things that it's beneficial when you're working on the paid search side of things, but one of the pieces of information that I think PPCs and SEO teams can share with each other is the query data. So if there aren't any paid search campaigns being run and you're running SEO, if you have the ability even to run it for a short term, even if it's a huge spend, you're not running it for a huge amount of time, you can gather some interesting data just in being able to see what's in those query reports. And again, the query versus the terms that you're targeting, the queries are literally what a searcher used to have your ad trigger, and then they clicked on that ad. So the query data is incredibly valuable. It helps in a number of ways. So on the paid search side of things, we use that query data to either find irrelevant traffic or undesirable traffic and then drop that out. You can do the same thing sort of on the SEO side. It can give you insight into aspects of things that people are searching for that maybe you don't find all that desirable, and you'd want to move away from that or de-emphasize those types of things in the content that you're creating on the organic side. It also gives you really good insight into the intent and like, what are people doing when they're searching? What literally are the terms that are bringing them to your site? That's incredibly powerful data. So if these campaigns, if PPC is running already and there's a team in place and they've been running campaigns, ask for as much data as you can possibly get on the query campaigns. So with that data, again, you can see in both Google Ads and Microsoft Advertising the exact queries that resulted in ad clicks. So that is very valuable. If you take that data and you combine it with what you can see in the Google Search Console, you can gain even greater insight into what is currently driving people to the site. And you can see if there are holes in what's organically driving people to the site and what will get them there on the paid side when you're able to completely 100% target the terms that have been deemed most valuable and of most interest for the types of people that you want to drive to the site. So again, it can give you ideas and it can spark places to audit and review what's going on with your content and places you might need to fill it in. You can learn a lot about the intent and the information that might be missing from the site as well, that the users want and need from those queries. All right, this is the part that's really cool. I have been working on a project for the last few months that has been unlike anything that I've ever really worked on. And I've been doing this for a really, really long time. If you don't have ads running on Facebook, if there's any way that, again, you can get some ads set up and run them for a short period of time, the amount of information that you can glean regarding different types of audiences can be pretty amazing. So, you know, Facebook's big strength is all of this demographic data that they have. And you can tap into that and create interest audiences. So you could be showing content and showing ads to audiences that you've identified in your personas, as far as like people who buy our product, you know, they're of this demographic makeup, they have these interests, they have this household income. You can set all that stuff up in Facebook. And then you can test things to see what resonates with those people. So if you're running ads on Facebook, or you can get them run, you can request that data as far as like what types of content and what topics were resonating with people. And again, use that to create your organic content so that you're speaking to people in the way that you already have some data shows resonates with them. And then you can also get really good demographic information from Facebook. I mean, they know everything about us. So once you have content that's working, once you see that something is resonating, even within a particular interest audience that you've set up, you can easily see the demographic makeup, male, female, and the age groups that are really engaging with that content. And that can give you some insights into things that, again, you may wish to do with your organic content. So there's a lot that can be gleaned from doing some of these small experiments, or again, if you're lucky enough to have another team that is running social ads, if you can get those, if you can get your hands on some of this data, it's just a whole other layer that you can use to create content and also to input into your tools as well.
Thank you. So I have 2 tips for you today. The first one is about the attribution stuff, and using it in showing that content is actually selling, unlike some claims that they say that it's not selling. The second one is about using the results of the previous attribution as a feed to campaigns and generating more conversions thanks to that. So first of all, if you are not using the data-driven attribution model, you definitely should, because some the data-driven attribution models are responsible for providing you information with how much money each of the channel, or how much conversions each of the channel on campaigns are responsible for. And when we talk about attribution, we mostly say about campaigns only. But it's also possible to include some content in it using the landing pages. So, for example, if you have some cookies ID, if you have timestamps, you can create a customer journey based on campaigns and add content, and the same using the same process by using the landing pages. So, for example, if our customer created some kind of customer journey, and in the end generated a conversion worth, for example, 1,000 euros, using the data-driven attribution model can provide us with information that the content is responsible for example, 260 euros. So that's the first step. You already know that the content is selling, but what you really want to know is which content actually it is that is selling. So you want to pinpoint the specific content. So after the first attribution, you can use the same process again, but try to create a so-called content customer journey. So thanks to that, you can pinpoint exact articles that are the best in selling, and the best in generating conversions. And thanks to that, you would know how much money you would need to spend on future content, and what kind of content do you really need to make. And the second tip is about using the results of the previous attribution as a feed to your campaigns. And what kind of campaign does it have to be? It doesn't really matter. In our case, we use the DSA campaigns. So we already shown that the content is selling. So if it is already selling, we can push it even further to its limits and create the connection between the campaigns and the content. And in this connection, the campaigns are actually responsible for pulling the traffic, and the content is actually responsible for selling. So it's kind of a different approach than we are used to. So in our case, when we had the first idea about that, we created a feed based off the attribution. We had some the best articles that were selling. So, for example, 25 the best of the best. And after 2 weeks, before the coronavirus disease has spread around the world, we measured it with other DSA campaigns, because we chose to feed the DSA campaign with this feed. And the results were actually really good. So the CPC was down by almost 30%. Same goes for CPO, down by 9%, and CTR went up by 90%, obviously compared to the other DSA campaigns. Unfortunately, the tests were halted because of the coronavirus, obviously, so there was a lot of panic movements on our client's side, but we will definitely go back to this, and I encourage you to try it on your own. Try to create an attribution model that will help to manage your campaigns better. But you don't have to forget about the content. You can include content in your attribution models, and it's done easily by landing pages. And also, the attribution can be only a foundation to your further research, to your further analysis and reports. And it can prove that the content is actually selling, and it is selling very, very well. I believe that's all I have for you today.
Well, those are some fantastic tips. Thank you very much, Azeem, Julie, and Maciej. We've got loads of comments in the chat, which is great. And I'm going to pass over to Carrie to ask some of those questions that have come up from you all.
Great, thank you. So the first question we have is from Claire. She's asking top tips for dealing with a client, especially SMBs, where budgets are always tight, that won't see the value of bidding on brand terms.
Sack them as a client. No, I'm joking. What I would say, especially in this scenario, it's somewhere that I've been myself, where the client is absolutely adamant that they won't bid on the brand term, or that they just don't want to, a little bit of convincing is needed. Convince them to run a test where you do it for 1 week and you don't for another week, or maybe extend the period of the test and then put the results of that test to them. And more often than not always the case, but more often than not, those results from that test will speak for themselves. And as I mentioned, whenever you sort out your budgets for the year, have a small or big that they may be. I once had a client who could only afford €50 a month for their marketing. Always try and segment some of that just for branded traffic, because the results are immeasurable.
I have a thought on this as well. I would say one of the most if you're trying to move them in the direction that they should be advertising on their brand, which I am a huge proponent of, if only for the defensive position that you're taking, one thing that I have found is incredibly effective is if you screenshot some SERPs for brand and they see that their most hated competitors are in fact already bidding on their brand. That can be very effective in motivating them to want to put aside a little bit of money to defend that space, especially when you bring mobile into the conversation and how condensed things are, and then someone's searching for them and they're seeing their top competitor right on the top of their mobile screen.
That's really useful. Thank you, guys. We have another question from Christina. She's asking, I think you guys have mostly answered this already, Do you think it makes sense to claim your brand name on Google Ads?
100% yes.
Yeah, definitely.
101%. Yeah, always.
Anything you'd like to add maybe there?
I think we pretty much kind of touched on it in part and in a little bit more detail throughout the presentation, but you always should, if not just to take up more real estate on the SERP, or as Julie rightly mentioned, whether you've got competitors in the space that are trying to take up that as well, purely from a defensive point of view, you should absolutely always do it. It's quite subjective, I should say. There are many blog posts about why you should or why you shouldn't. But me and hopefully Julie, maybe all of us here, are in the team. Yes, you should always do it.
That's really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I think you should use it. I was going to say, I think you absolutely should use it, and I think there definitely are strong and varying opinions on whether or not that's the correct thing to do. But in my experience, and again, I've been doing this for a really, really long time, there are far more benefits to doing it than there are cons, to not do it. There's more risk in not doing it than there is, I feel strongly that people should do it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So we have a question from Sarah. Can you use PPC to get content to seed faster?
Do you mean if you're running ads that are pointing people to organic content that you've created? Is that the gist of the question?
I assume so, yeah.
You definitely can. I don't know that it helps speed along the organic process to getting those things indexed and having them rank for what you'd like them to rank for. But if you're interested in knowing if people are going to engage with that content, certainly you can use paid to drive people who should be interested in that content to that content and see what they do, and take a look in analytics what happens when they get there.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Anna. She said she'd be really interested in how you onboard new accounts which have been managed by other agencies or the client before.
Ooh, this one's a fun one. I'm definitely going to jump in before Julie because I'm interested in Julie's answer. So I'm going to say what I want to say and then see what she says, purely because I'm in-house now and I've not done this for a while, where I've onboarded a new client. But when I was at an agency side, I would always do a full audit of the account, top to bottom, in and out, go right down to the deepest levels in terms of ad scheduling, device bid modifiers, audiences, X, Y, and Z. Just literally, if it was a car, for example, I would take every piece out, have a look at it one by one, and then put it back in, because ultimately the client's goal will be the same. I want to sell more of X, or I want more leads, or this, that, and the other. But the way that you can get to it would be very different. So agencies would have a very, very different approach to it. One example I can give you is I had a client very big in the retail space, European. They moved to the agency that I worked for from a different agency. And there was a little bit of underhanded tactics at play from the previous agency, which we never knew about. One of the client's main KPIs was year-on-year growth by weekly traffic. So at the end of their final week, they turned off a majority of their PPC campaigns and literally killed a lot of their traffic. It never came into play until the following week, where we saw a huge drop. The clients immediately on the phone, and they said, "What's going on? We've lost all our traffic. We knew we shouldn't have gone with this agency. We should have stuck with the old agency. What's going on? Fix it, fix it." And the simple answer, the obvious answer would have been, well, the old agency have done this. And we could have just said that and sat back and not done anything. What we actually did was said, well, look, we found out that your instruction to the old agency was to get X, Y, and Z. Because we're a new agency, we needed that new instruction again. What we have done already is we noticed it just at the same time as you have, and we've put into place a 3-point action plan to get this traffic back and also grow it further year on year. And we held ourselves accountable to specific targets to say that we were going to achieve this and prove that we are worth the investment versus what happened previously.
That's great. Anything Julie or Maciej would like to add?
I fully agree with what Azeem said. I cannot stretch how important it is to fully audit the account the client has given us.
I agree with that 100%. I was on a panel recently where we were talking about some of these things too, how to sort of gracefully let business go and how to gracefully take on, new accounts. And one of the things that we were talking about, in addition to really taking a full look from all 360 degrees, of what's happening in the account, is also then to create different sort of different milestones for the actions that you want to take. So obviously, depending on the state of the campaign that you're taking over, there could be a lot that needs to be done. There could be not a whole lot that needs to be done, but you're just going to take it over and manage it in the way that you would do it, right? That makes sense to you and follows your methodologies and your experience and that type of thing. But creating like a 30, 60, and 90-day plan where you are addressing the most urgent things, like in those first 30 days, and then you're laying out what you plan to do and things you plan to change and modify and start to test, like at that 60-day time frame, and then again at that 90-day time frame. It gives everybody a nice framework to work within and to know sort of what to expect. And you can sort of adjust it on the fly, but I think definitely giving them the idea of like, this is what we're going to address right away, that needs to happen, and then here's our plan going forward, typically has worked well for me and for other people, that I know well as well.
That's really useful. Thank you. We have another question from Alexandra about shopping ads. Can they steal clicks from organic results? What do you think?
I think it's can they steal the clicks? Do you think that the shopping ads are stealing the clicks from organic?
This is one where I wish Kirk was here, PPC Kirk, because he is the king of Google Shopping. I know that recently there was an update where you can now get pretty much free shopping clicks, but given that I haven't dabbled in shopping in a few years, that's the extent of my knowledge. Maybe Julie, PPC wizard, could add something else.
Oh, I love being called a wizard. That's exciting. Yeah. So to sort of broadly answer the first question, yes, shopping comes up. I mean, when you do a query for any type of product, the shopping ads they dominate. Even if you're running search ads for things that are shoppable, their search ads are typically not as prominent as the shopping ads. So yeah, any kind of product has really, the SEO for that has gotten a lot harder, I think, over the last couple of years. And the addition of the free feeds, the being picked up by Google Shopping ads, it's not on the main SERP, I should clarify. So the free placements that you get, it's in the shopping tab on Google. So it's not supplanting any of the paid shopping ads that are showing up in the primary SERP, but it is opening the door for businesses who maybe haven't participated before to kind of get their act together and have a feed and sort of start to see some data coming in, and it puts more data and it puts more options in the in Google's shop. I mean, they're trying to compete with Amazon, right? I mean, we all know this. So the more merchants and the more people that they can have feeding information into their shopping data, ultimately they want to be more of a destination where people go first, because so many product related searches start and end on Amazon, and they want a piece of that pie.
Great, thank you. Going back to the question that Christina asked earlier about bidding on your branded terms, she was actually asking about trademarking your brand terms. So does it make sense to trademark your brand for Google Ads?
So the way that trademarks work in Google Ads is maybe not as intuitive as you would think. You cannot use someone else's trademark in your ad copy. That's pretty much the only limitation. You can bid on somebody else's trademarked name as a keyword. You're not prohibited from doing that. What you are prohibited from doing is, if you have a beverage that you're advertising and you're a direct competitor to Coca-Cola, you could bid on Coca-Cola as a term that you want to target, but you can't use Coca-Cola in your ad copy. That's pretty much how, it's an oversimplification, but essentially that's how trademarks work inside of Google Ads. They're not going to prohibit you from targeting a trademarked competitor name in your keywords, but you can't use that term in your actual ad copy.
Thank you for the clarification. Anything you want to add, Azeem?
I was just going to say it's a good way to see what your competitors might say about you, because exactly as Julie said, you can't stop them from doing that, but you can stop them from putting their name in the copy, but you can't stop them from bidding on your brand name. So couple examples you can think of are huge, let's say Evernote, for example, or in the UK. Previously, I've seen things like, let's think of, so Funky Pigeon and Moonpig, huge competitors, used to always be on each other's terms, but never would say the name in the copy, and they'd always say, well, instead of X, use Y, or come to us instead. Very inventive ways to, as I mentioned in my piece, about trying to steal the competitor's traffic at the very last minute. It's a good way to see sneaky tactics from your competitors about last minute land grabs, basically. Or I think Monday.com, the ones I'm sick of seeing their adverts pretty much everywhere. If you search for them, you'll probably see a competitor on the advert saying, think about this. Often with SEO tools, if you search for the tool's name, you might see that there'll be a paid ad there saying, consider this instead, but they won't directly refer to it in the actual name.
Yeah, definitely. And one last question really quickly. Which attribution model should we be using? I think this one's aimed at Maciej.
I believe you shouldn't use the last click model attribution, definitely. And also you shouldn't use any of the heuristics models that are available. Because, well, if you use, for example, the last click model, you get rid of the 95% of the data you have. So if you're responsible for campaigns or anything in the middle of the customer journey, you're done. You will not be shown in the results, and that's obviously really bad. So if you have a customer journey, and obviously you want to have one, you should use a model that includes all the data that you have. This means all the data that hasn't converted yet, obviously, and also the data. It really also depends on the fact whether you want to include. If it is important for you to understand which place on the customer journey each campaign has. So I would say that you can look up into Shapley models. The Markov chains are actually really, really good. And also attribution models that are available can be made using the random forests algorithms. So these three, obviously, as a first try.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's everything we have time for today. Back over to Jay.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for your questions. So you can get hold of Azeem, Julie, and Maciej on their respective Twitter and LinkedIn handles. So we will be sharing out the link to the YouTube video, and we'll be tagging them. So feel free to carry on that conversation there as well with them. Thank you very much to them for giving their time out today and sharing their insightful tips at Tea Time SEO. We do, of course, have another Tea Time SEO tomorrow. We have that at 4 p.m. with Becky and Gino, and they'll be talking about how brands can focus around having a positive impact to their SEO right now. We'll add that T. So thank you all for coming. I hope you can come tomorrow with your tea for Tea Time SEO at 4 p.m. BST. Thank you very much.